Hello everyone, here are 5 tips to help you reach diamond in teamfight tactics. Before diving deeper for each of them and give specific example, I'm just gonna give you the 5 tips right now. First of all, you need to master 1 or 2 comps initially. You gotta start slow. Then you have to master the basics of the sets. So in set 5, that means mastering shadow items, mastering level spikes. This changes from patches to patches and definitely from sets to sets. After that, you'll need to be aware of what is meta, both early game and late game, because even if we master 1 or 2 comps, you still need an early game board. Then obviously, you're gonna have to learn to transition. You're gonna learn which boards are strong, you're gonna play the late game comp that you think is strong. Well, how do we get from A to B? This is probably the most crucial step of like a successful teamfight tactics play. And last but not least, you need to do some VOD reviews. This last tip definitely applies to literally every single game. VOD reviews is the best way you can improve in any games, and teamfight tactics is not an exception. Obviously, everyone has a different experience climbing through the ranks of TFT, but these 5 tips really helped me at the start of this set. Now let's dive a bit deeper. What do I mean by master 1 or 2 comps? Basically, you pick up whatever website you like. Let's say lolchess, bliss.gg, or the meta cheat sheet that's usually on the subreddit. You look at the comps that are meta and you pick one. You start with one and you play it every single game. This is not the best way to be great at the game, but it is absolutely crucial to take one step at a time. Mastering TFT takes time, and going with only one comp initially is gonna really help you with the second tip to reach diamond. So for example, in set 5, I basically picked Hellion Reroll. I really liked this comp at the start of the set. I thought it was easy to pull off because you don't have a whole lot of flexible things to do, and it was perfect. It allowed me to reach a lot of top 4s without worrying too much about a lot of things. A lot of players are actually like one-tricking their way into Challenger. But obviously this is not the best way to play TFT. This is not the way to be the absolute best player, but initially and to reach diamond, this is usually way more than enough. Then what do I mean by mastering the basics of the set? For Reckoning, we have a great example with shadow items, but for Fate, it was the chosen mechanic. And for the galaxies, obviously it were the different galaxies. But this is a very important step. Let's take the Hellion Reroll example. Knowing what shadow items I could slam on Ziggs and which one I could not actually like helped a lot initially to learn, okay, what does Shadow IE do? What does Shadow Jewel Gauntlet do? What does Shadow Ginsu do? It takes a while to be familiar with all of those things. And if you don't have to worry about learning multiple comps at the same time with multiple early game boards and all that jazz, it's gonna give a lot more space for you to either go read, go watch streams, or look at online resources to learn what the shadow items do. And you can also just, do trial and error. And sometimes you have a carousel with a shadow item you don't know, and you just pick it up and see what happens. This is a dangerous tip though. The other important part about learning a set is the level spike timings. Usually you'll have a good idea if you watch a lot of streams or if you are aware of the Metacomp cheat sheet that I will put in the description below. It usually gives the timing you want to aim for. What I suggest is when you start climbing, you try to reach those spikes at exactly the levels that are written in the guides. Later, once you have mastered the basics of like when to spike and when not to, then you can actually deviate a bit from the rule of thumb, because they are rule of thumbs, Sometimes you'll have to level a bit earlier to keep a win streak on. Sometimes you won't be able to afford to go level 8. You'll have to just play the strongest board on 7 and hope you don't bottom 4. But if you start by mastering the simple concepts first, then you'll be able to expand on more complicated things. The third tip was be aware of what's meta both early and late game. This will really help. I'm gonna go with the same example of Hellion. Usually late game, you want to swap the Ziggs out for the Teemo or for a Heimerdinger. This is something that you have to master eventually. When you start with the comp, just go with the simple concept of like, this is the best board I can have late game, let me aim towards that. But what if I didn't have a Hellion start? What do I do then? Then I can't play my comp? Obviously no. You need to know what's the strong boards right now, what's the strong early boards, because usually that's where you want to keep your HP safe. You don't want to reach the later stage with basically 30 HP when everyone is at 70 or 80 HP. To do that, there's a lot of resources online. There's a lot of YouTube guides, there's a lot of Reddit guides, and there's also guides that provide both information on this specific thing, the early game boards, and how to transition. There's a post on the TFT Reddit that basically have a lot of good early game boards right now and how they transition into late game comps. I'm gonna put the link in the description down below, but these kind of resources are often available, and this is just a clear visual way on how you can go from good early to good late game. Well, right now, if the comp is specifically Vel'Koz, then you will have multiple paths to actually reach that comp. Right now, you can go with the Spellweaver backline early game, you can go with a Redeemed early game. There's a lot of options. You need to be aware of what are the good early boards. Even if you play like Vel'Koz only, let's say you try to force Spellweaver every single game, sometimes you will have to go like Trundle Pantheon frontline. You need to know what's good and basically learn to transition from what's good to the comp that you want to play, which is the fourth tip: learn to transition. This is by far the hardest thing to do in teamfight tactics, is when should you push for your late game carry? When should you push for the leveling aspect? When should you roll down? Every single thing that I just mentioned is usually covered in the cheat sheet, or it's covered in YouTube guides. It's gonna take a while though. Having the numbers but experiencing it takes a while. And to do that, the best way is actually the fifth tip: VOD reviews. It's going to be hard to transition perfectly initially. It's almost impossible for any player to have flawless transition if you never actually like practiced it, or if you didn't read on it. But VOD reviews will really help you notice what units you shouldn't have sold, what units you actually kept for way too long, and it's gonna help to make you realize that maybe you passed a knight frontline early that you should have picked because you would have 2 knights at 2 stars instead of like 2 brawlers at 1 stars. Also, the VOD reviews will help your late game, especially positioning. Sometimes we don't have a lot of time because you gotta roll, you gotta slam items, then you gotta position. Some comps are harder to position than others. You have to dodge the Vel'Koz, you have to dodge the Viegos of this world, the Diana of this world. It's always really hard to do at the same time. But if you go into your VOD reviews, then you might realize what's wrong with your positioning right now. I think initially when I started playing Kayle, I didn't clump up my units close to my Kayle in a lot of the cases. Obviously, it's not always the best way to do it, but sometimes you have to do that to protect her from assassins, and that simple concept cost me a lot of wins. And then I realized that when I actually like watched my VODs versus watching streams, which is like kind of a bonus tip, is watch some streams. Watch players like Soju, watch players like Kiyum. Those guys are really, really good at TFT, and you're gonna learn a lot of things by simply watching them, watching the decisions they make. Which comms do they go for? Which don't they go for? What would you have done in this specific situation? And it's really gonna help you broaden your view of the TFT meta. I really hope those 5 tips help you. Subscribe for more TFT content, and I will see you next time.